Hello, everyone. Welcome to another live stream. My name is Spencer List. We're going to get right into it. I hope you all have had a good weekend. Had to take a week off from the live streams, but we'll hopefully continue to keep them going. I had a recent video that I made about this topic that sparked a lot of questions and engagement, so I decided to go ahead and talk about this topic on the live stream. If you're joining live, feel free to comment where you're watching from, and then also let me know if you have any questions. I'll check the comments. I'm in the private Facebook group. I'm on YouTube and on LinkedIn. So I'll check and see if there are any comments. Hopefully I see those as they come in. If not, I'll answer them at the end. And then a lot of people have already asked questions about this topic. So I have that in the presentation as well. So I'll talk about the answers to those questions. So today we're talking about how to build generational wealth using the 529 to Roth IRA transfer rule. There are a lot of ways to build generational wealth, and this is a common goal that a lot of my clients have, and people who talk to me about their financial plans. It's common to want to set up your children and your heirs for success and leave a lasting legacy. So a lot of different ways to do that, but there is a new rule that you could add to your strategy, and it's a really interesting one. It has certain rules. We'll talk about that, but I'm also going to give an example of what this could look like in your financial plan. So let's get right into it. So for those of you joining for the first time, my name is Spencer List. I'm a certified financial planner. I spent most of my career as a professional musician, though, and then transferred into financial planning. I'll tell that story in a moment, but I played all the saxophones and woodwinds at the highest level and had a interesting career for a very long time. So now I'm a holistic financial life planner for music executives. Not a big fan of small talk or holidays. I'm also caffeine free, so if we do get coffee, feel free to get some on my behalf. And outside of music, I enjoy woodworking and hockey, and I'm a MF Doom super fan. Rest in peace. And I'm also a husband and father to a very young baby, and everything's going well there. So you might be asking, why is a former professional musician now a holistic financial life planner? And it's because of this bank statement. So almost 10 years ago, I had $67 to my name, and this was just after returning from a summer tour, and it was a wake-up call. I felt vulnerable and scared. At this point, I had felt like I was doing everything I should be with my money. I had always a good amount of savings, and I was playing at the highest level. I had just come off a lot of really interesting performances with household names, yet I didn't really have much to show for it. And so I remember telling myself I never want to feel this way again, and no other music professional should either. This should not be the norm that people are financially illiterate. So I started teaching myself everything I could about personal finance through books and podcasts, just self-taught for a long time. And it changed my life drastically. Within 18 months, I started saving into a retirement account. My income increased because my relationship with money improved and my mindset. And I bought my first property 18 months after this date. And so I realized that when you learn financial literacy and you implement it in your life, it can change your life for the better forever and a lot faster than you think. So I started teaching my music community through a podcast, newsletter, blog, speaking engagements, did a coaching course just to try to educate as much as I could. And eventually I wanted to learn these topics at a professional level. So I ended up pursuing the Certified Financial Planner designation, and now I run my own firm, Motif Planning, for music executives and pretty much anyone in the music industry and outside the industry. So I'll talk about that at the end. But yeah, so I still do a lot of free education for the music industry. I do pro bono financial planning for those facing financial hardship. And then, of course, I do ongoing holistic life planning for my clients. So a disclaimer, everything we talk about today is educational only. It is not personalized financial advice, because I don't know who's watching and I don't know your personal situation unless you were a client. So just keep in mind, all this is educational. Some of this may or may not be in your best interest and work for you. So we're just going to talk about this strategy, the rules, what's possible, and then I can answer your questions. So why this strategy matters. So for people wanting to create lasting financial security for their children, in most cases that starts with education, right? We typically want our children to be educated as best as possible, because we know, and studies show, that the more educated they are, the more success that they are likely to have in their lives. So in a lot of cases, parents will start by investing in their education through a 529 plan, which is an investment account meant for education, and it has tax benefits where you contribute to the 529 plan and your child is the fund beneficiary. So you're contributing to it, it's your account, but your child, or whoever you designate the beneficiary, would receive the funds, and you could use those funds to pay for educational expenses and any growth that you use. So you invest it and let it grow, usually over their childhood. By the time they need it for higher education, you've got contributions you've made, but then you also have the growth from investing it. If you use those funds for education, it's tax-free. So it's a really great way to fund your children's education in a tax-efficient manner. So the strategy we're going to be talking about it's sort of a next step. If you have unused 529 plan funds for various reasons, we'll talk about that shortly, you can use this strategy to start building their Roth IRA, which is money that's typically designated for long-term retirement for them. And you can start at a very young age. So we're going to talk through the whole strategy. So this is a really interesting one where you can help invest in their education and their retirement before their brains are even developed enough to understand any of this or care about it. So a lot of these things happen well before they would ever do any of this for themselves. So the 529 to Roth IRA transfer rules. So up to $35,000 of 529 plan funds can be transferred to a Roth IRA. And it's, like I said, one of many strategies to build generational wealth. So the example I give, some people will say, this is not enough for generational wealth. So it really depends on what you do and the growth that happens, the contributions you make, your investment returns over the long term, and there's so many assumptions you have to make about the future, but the concept still applies that you can start very young for them and get the compounding starting really early, and they can benefit greatly from it. So it's meant for unused 529 plan funds. So one of the questions you'll see later was, so how do you pay for college if you're doing this transfer? So really this is for funds you don't need in the 529 plan, and there's a lot of different reasons that might happen. And if you want to look up the source, go directly to the IRS. It's publication 590A. And let's talk about the rules you have to follow. So the 529 plan itself has to be open for at least 15 years. You cannot transfer the last 5 years of contributions or earnings, and I'll show how all this works in an example here in a moment. The beneficiary that you are transferring 529 plan funds to the Roth IRA, that year you do the transfer, they have to have earned income. So I'll explain that in more detail. And annual limits apply. So I mentioned earlier that it's here too. The total transfer is $35,000 per beneficiary over their lifetime, right? So this is typically kind of a limited thing that you could do. But you can't transfer the entire $35,000 at one time because the transfer is limited to the Roth IRA contribution maximum that year that you do it. So if you were doing it this year, the most you could do is $7,000. So you'd still have $28,000 that you could do in the future. So you can't do it all in one lump sum, okay? So if you follow all these rules, you don't have to pay any tax or penalties on this transfer, which is fantastic. And in a lot of cases, the money that you're transferring is growth. And this is growth that, if you didn't use it for education, would be penalized or taxed in the 529. So if you don't use the 529 plan funds for education, qualified education expenses, then you are subject to a 10% penalty and tax on the growth. So this is a way to avoid that and just move it to the Roth IRA, and then any growth in the Roth IRA is tax-free for life for your child, okay? So here's the example. Right when you have your child, you do $1,000. And you could change these numbers however you want, but this is just for conceptual purposes. Let's say you did $1,000 into a 529 at birth. And then you started saving $200 a month for 15 years. So over those 15 years, you would have contributed $37,000. And the growth, I just did 7% as the assumption. So it depends on how you're invested, and it depends on how things go over those 15 years. But, you know, a relatively conservative assumption, given that you're diversified. A lot of 529 plans are mostly in equities. They're pretty aggressive. And then they get more conservative as the child approaches the age of needing the funds for education. So I'm going to assume 7%. So you've contributed $37,000 over these 15 years, and the account has now grown to about $63,000. Now remember, you can only transfer $35,000 to the Roth IRA, okay? And also, we cannot use the last 5 years of contributions or growth. So that's why you'll see in this image here, we're looking at year 10. So we have to go back to year 10, back 5 years, and that's the amount you could transfer. I did the math to work out to where it's pretty much perfect that the value of the account would be just over $35,000. So you will have made contributions of $25,000, and you will have made about $10,000 of growth. So you will be allowed in this case in year 15, when your child is 15 or 16, to transfer up to $35,000. Now remember, we have to go by the annual limits. We can't do the whole $35,000 at one time. You know, we have to go each year. We would do the annual maximum into their Roth IRA until we get to having done $35,000. Okay. And I think we have a question. Hold on, let me switch over here. Okay, so from Mike. Hey, Mike. What if your 529 plan contains more than $35,000 and your child doesn't go to school? I know you can then use it for a grandchild, but what if you never have a grandchild? Is that money just gone? Okay, I'm going to answer this question, so just bear with me when I get through this example and I get to the questions I have, and I will answer this. Perfect question. And let me just check if we've got any questions elsewhere. Okay. Let me get back to my screen. So yeah, I will answer that very shortly. Okay, so we've got $63,000 in our 529, and your child is now 15 or 16, which is typically a good year for them to start working. Remember, the child has to have earned income. Now, they don't have to put the money that they earned into the Roth IRA. They just have to file and claim that as income in most cases, they are still your dependent, so it would go on the tax return showing they earned that income. They don't have to put those dollars into the Roth IRA. They just have to show that they made that much. So if they made $7,000 in that year, then you could do this transfer. But transfer this money, not the money they made, because it's not likely they'll want to transfer their hard-earned money at that age to their Roth IRA. Okay, so let me go to the next slide and show you. Now, in this example, I just did, for easy math's sake, if you just did a lump sum of $35,000 at year 15. But remember, you cannot do that. You have to do up to the Roth IRA annual limit. So that would probably be over a few years. But the end result is very similar. So let's say you did this, you ended up getting all the $35,000 in there over the next few years, and it grows at 7%. Over 50 years, so now your child is age 65, they would have, at 7% growth, they would have about $1 million. And that doesn't include contributions that they will eventually make when they become adults and want to start saving for their future. So it's a huge Kickstarter, and all of that money is tax-free, okay? So this is something that, depends on the contributions you make. It depends on a lot of assumptions. But what a fantastic way to start building generational wealth for them well before they are wanting to do that for themselves. Okay. Oh, I see. Mike said sounds good. Okay. Okay, so I think that's all I wanted to say here. So it's just a great example. And yes, it is mostly for unused 529 plan funds. Okay, so here's some common questions that I got when I first posted my video online about it. So can I transfer all $35,000 in 1 year using a mega backdoor Roth? So no, right? You can only do up to that year's Roth IRA contribution maximum, and it counts as their Roth IRA contribution that year. So you can't do this transfer and then they also contribute to the Roth IRA. So it counts as their Roth IRA contribution that year. The mega backdoor Roth is meant for qualified accounts like a 401k or 403b, where you make after-tax contributions to your 401k above the maximum individual deferral limit, and then roll those funds to Roth inside the 401k or 403b plan. This question it's a very good question. It's just the terminology is a little bit different. It is sort of the same concept, but the mega backdoor Roth is specifically an in-plan conversion in a 401k or a 403b plan. So a little bit different, but similar concept. Do you have to pay taxes on the transfer? So when you originally contribute to the 529 plan, that money was already taxed. So when you earned, $7,000 and you put that into the 529, you paid tax on that $7,000 on your tax return that year. So technically, that money has already been taxed when it gets gifted into the 529. When you transfer it to the Roth IRA, and you follow all the rules, and you have to be very careful about all those rules, then there is no penalty or taxes. That's one of the major benefits. And then that money's tax-free forever, and any growth on that money. And you don't have to use it for education expenses once you move it to the Roth. One of my kids are already 13 or 16, so some of you watching, might have older children. You didn't start as early. It's never too late. I think all of us wish we started at this age. So I know people who started, in their 60s and they still were able to find a way to retire. So having started at any age when your kids are still children is plenty of time for them to build wealth. And you can, it might be too late to really think about the 529 plan because there won't be that many years unless you wanted to maybe wait for graduate school or doctorate degree or something like that. You could maybe consider it, but maybe you just directly contribute to their Roth IRA at that age. Is an UTMA account better? So that's a Uniform Transfers to Minors Act. So this is another example of building generational wealth. So I'm not going to talk too much about it, but there are some drawbacks. One being that there are different tax consequences based on the investment income that occurs. And there are thresholds where the taxes get a lot higher. And so you want to be careful of that. And then also UTMAs, and UGMA is the other one, Uniform Gifts to Minors Act. Both of those usually have age triggers where the funds or the assets in these accounts are then fully owned by your child at a certain age. Sometimes age 18, sometimes age 21, age 30. It depends on a lot of different things. And you just might not be in a position where you want the assets to fully transfer them, where they can literally do whatever they want with the assets and you can't do anything about it. So you release some control over the funds when you do this, but there are some advantages as well. What about gifting funds to help them invest? So I think the comment I got here was that they were worried about taxes and penalties for just gifting and helping them directly fund their Roth IRA. So when you gift money to your children, as long as it's under the annual gift tax exclusion, which I believe is $19,000 per person this year, there is no gift tax. And if you did make gifts of over that annual amount, there is a lifetime gift tax exemption that you could tap into. It's a pretty high number. So in most cases, the gift tax is not really something that comes into play very often. And then the only other penalty to consider here is, like I mentioned before, the child has to have earned income the year that this Roth IRA contribution happens. And someone made a great point on this comment. If they mow lawns and get paid cash but don't file it, and claim that income on the tax return, that is not technically earned income. So you have to claim that income for it to be earned income. Essentially, you got to pay tax on some income for you to be able to make this Roth IRA contribution, is really what the government is saying. So how do you pay for college then? So I think the question was, if I'm transferring all this money, I thought this was for college, and now I'm transferring it to the Roth IRA. So really, this is for unused 529 plans. And here's where I'll answer your question, Mike, as well. So a few things that people think about with the 529 plan is they feel restricted to just using it for education, right? Because there's a 10% penalty and tax on all the growth for any distributions made that do not go towards qualified education expenses. That's really lame, right? It doesn't sound fun. And so there are some ways around that. Before I get to that, I want to mention, when you're thinking about where to save, you have to think about whether your child is even going to want to go to college. Will college really be something that kids are wanting to do by the time they get to the age that they want to go to school, right? The landscape around that may be changing. If they get scholarships or grants where they just don't need any of these funds, right? You might be sitting there with hundreds of thousands of dollars and they don't need it, right? So that's why typically I recommend saving a mix of into the 529, knowing that it's sort of restricted around the education, and you sort of have this 35,000 of it could be moved to the Roth IRA for them, which is fantastic. And then a portion into a taxable brokerage that does not have any penalties. You can use the money for whatever you want. It doesn't have any of the restrictions. So it doesn't have necessarily the benefits if you use it for education, but it doesn't have the restrictions as well, right? So it's nice to have flexibility. So a lot of times with my clients, I recommend they do a portion into both, and the strategy behind that depends on your situation. The other thing I wanted to mention was, what you can do with it. So like Mike said, let me repeat his question. I have something blocking his question. So I'll read it again. So what if your 529 plan contains more than 35K and your child doesn't go to school? I know you can then use it for a grandchild, but what if you never have a grandchild? Is that money just gone? So yes, you can. So you can move it to different beneficiaries, which is fantastic. You can move it back to yourself. And so a lot of people think that they might not do that, but it could be likely that if you just have an interest in something new later in life, you could technically go to school for it, whether it's online or in person or whatever, and use the 529, put it back in your name as the fund beneficiary, and go learn something for free, essentially. Use that money to educate yourself. You can switch it to other beneficiaries. So I think worst case, what happens is the money's not gone. You just, like, if you don't move it to a different beneficiary, you don't use it for yourself, and you just want to use the money for non-education expenses, which is totally fine, you just take the 10% penalty hit and you pay taxes on the growth. Remember, you don't pay taxes on the contributions because you already paid tax on the money before you contributed it to the 529. So it's only on the growth. So, it's kind of like worst case scenario. It's not the worst thing in the world. It's not going to blow up your financial plan, but I think the money's definitely not gone. The government just kind of says, hey, here's a little slap on the wrist of 10%. So it's likely that in most cases you won't run into that. Usually there's a way to find, someone that's meaningful to you to transfer to, or like I said, transfer it to yourself for education. Or, and just remember that it's just the growth that would get taxed and have the penalty. So if I go back, let me go back to the example so you can see kind of like a numbers. Let's see. So in this case, right, we did 15 years and we contributed 37K and the gross was 63K. So, the 37K would not be taxed, okay? And then it would only be the growth. So it's in all likelihood not as much of a penalty and tax as you think. And the tax piece also, that's the same if you had your money in a taxable brokerage, right? Any growth is going to be taxed if you sell those holdings and distribute the funds. So not the worst thing in the world. So hopefully that answered your question. Let me know. I'm peeping at the comments to see. Let me know if you have any follow-ups, and hopefully that was a helpful answer. So this strategy is good. It's good for education planning, for retirement planning for your children, and leaving a financial legacy. Some people, I remember in the comments of the video, were saying like it's not enough for generational wealth. Like, yes, $1 million in 50, 65 years will not go as far as $1 million does today. But what a great start though, right? And there are other things you can do. People have different versions of how much is enough too. So it just depends on your personal goals, your values, your priorities, your financial situation, and what you want to do for your children. There's also the potential downside of completely setting your children up for life. If you don't educate them, I've seen it far too many times where children just sort of are set up from birth and they sort of have no concept of money or finances. And sometimes they also lack fulfillment in their lives because of that. So, you can think about in terms of any of these three things, education, retirement planning, or financial legacy, like how much do you want to help them? How much do you want to really set them up to where they don't have to think for themselves? There's a spectrum there. A lot of parents sometimes only want to fund 25, 50% of their education. They want their children to have skin in the game, right? So there's a lot of personalized financial planning that has to go into answering those questions, but some things to think about. So before we go, you saw a lot of numbers today and a lot of rules. And this was like a tiny rule in all the IRS rules. So I have a 2-page PDF with all of the 2025 numbers, shows tax brackets, standard deductions, all the different contribution maximums that you can do to your retirement accounts, phase out ranges for tax credits and tax deductions, net investment income, tax thresholds, you name it. It's all on this, and you can have it for free. Just sign up to my newsletter. You can go to my website. I'll show you that in a moment. Sign up to my email newsletter, and the first email you will get will be this PDF with all of these numbers. So feel free to download that, sign up for my newsletter, and you'll get that immediately. And I update this every year because these numbers change constantly. So just wanted to mention that. I mentioned at the very beginning, I have my own financial planning firm for music executives. It's called Motif Planning, and I'm flat fee advice only and holistic. So I do not charge a percentage of assets. It's just a flat fee, and I'm advice only. So I actually don't take custody of any assets. I give you investment advice and I help monitor your investments, but I show you how to do it. We get on a screen share and you do it yourself. It's actually a lot easier than you think. And then I'm holistic. So we're not just talking about investments. We're talking about cash flow, insurance, lifetime tax planning, estate planning, executive compensation, employee benefits, major life changes, retirement, everything about your financial life, your relationship with money. So I'm very holistic in our approach with your financial plan. If you want to chat and just see if we're a good fit, or you want to learn more, I would love to learn more about you and hear your story. And even if I'm not a good fit, I will recommend you to someone who is, or find what you're looking for. There are a lot of different planners who do, they have different models of how they serve. So feel free to schedule a free consultation at motifplanning.com. I would love to meet you and talk with you and answer all of your questions and help you however I can. So let's see I'll check to see if there's any more questions. Mike, that was a fantastic question if you're still here. So I appreciate you asking, and I hope that was helpful. You said yes, answered, thanks, awesome. So feel free, I have a lot more resources, my blog on motifplanning.com. I have some other tools and stuff on there. You can follow me at Spencer List, mainly on LinkedIn, but I'm everywhere else as well. You can feel free to send me an email directly, spencer@motifplanning.com. If you just want to ask me something privately, that's totally fine. I understand money is a vulnerable and sensitive topic. And then, of course, like I mentioned before, subscribe to my newsletter, and you will immediately get that 2025 financial numbers PDF. And then I also will send you some other resources, free access to my financial planning software if you want to mess around in there. So yeah, let me check, see if there's any questions. And if not, feel free to say hi, say thank you, or just let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to see. I'm sure many of you are actually working, so maybe you have to get back to work. But I hope this was helpful. I'd love your feedback. Let me check if we got any questions, and I will go ahead and flip to the end. I just have a little outro, but feel free to comment any more questions, and I'll answer them directly in the comments. And I hope you all have a good rest of your day. Keep diving.